They came in chainsaws roaring at dawn. No warning, no courtesy. Just the crack and fall of timber echoing across my lakefront ranch. 1 tree, then 10, then 100, and by the time the sun touched the top of the pines, over 1,000 of them lay butchered on my land. A beautification initiative, the HOA president called it. Funny, I never signed up for an HOA. Not here, not on this land. And certainly not one arrogant enough to send a fleet of landscapers onto my property, without even knocking on my door. But the worst part? They thought they were doing me a favor. See, in their eyes, my property, a serene lake ranch, surrounded by old-growth pine and a thriving bird sanctuary, was an eyesore to their curated cul-de-sac culture creeping down from the hills. They wanted unified views, clean lines, perfect lake access. So they took it. Only there was one thing they didn't know. A detail buried deep in the deed and protected by law. That land, that forest, it wasn't just mine, it was federally protected. And what they did was a felony. They thought I was just some reclusive rancher. They didn't know I used to work in federal land management. And by the time they found out, it was too late. I had a plan, and the trees weren't the only thing about to fall. Let me back up a little. 5 years ago, I left the noise, moved out to the lake with my dog, a few goats, and a plan to write a book. The land I bought was a slice of heaven, 20 acres of lakefront wilderness, dense pine forest, and a creek that sang in the spring. The property also backed up to a section of land managed jointly by a federal conservation trust, and my deed included a stewardship clause. Basically, I was a guardian of part of that land. I kept it pristine. I even worked with a local conservation group to tag wildlife. Then came the HOA. Technically, they were a mile up the ridge in a new luxury development called Crystal Cove. Cookie-cutter mansions with steel fences, identical mailboxes, and fake stone facades. They started sending letters first. Unsightly tree lines causing visual disruption. Unregulated lake access trail crossing HOA-designated waterline. They tried to claim part of my dock was violating some imaginary zone. Then one day, I found HOA President Marlene Caldwell on my private trail, taking photos. "We need to talk about aligning aesthetics," she said, smiling like a rattlesnake. I told her politely to leave. She didn't. She kept coming back. Sometimes alone, sometimes with clipboard cronies. They'd show up, measure things, argue with the survey markers. They even hosted a lake cleanup and accidentally removed my handmade duck blinds. I called the sheriff. He said it was neighborly tension, and I should work it out. Then the trees fell. They came with a hired crew on a Monday morning. I wasn't home. They cleared the entire western slope. Over 1,001 trees, and that was just the beginning. First came the denial. We had arborist approval, Marlene claimed. Those trees were invasive, hazardous, except they weren't. I had the federal registry. Half of those trees were tagged by conservation biologists. One was even home to a nesting pair of protected hawks. Then came the fines. Yes, fines. They began slipping HOA violation notices into my mailbox, claiming I owed them for refusing property line compliance, damaged fencing aesthetics, and my personal favorite, failure to blend foliage. One day, I came home to find a laminated sign staked near the dock, HOA reclamation zone. Restoration in progress. I laughed out loud, until I realized they were serious. They'd hired a landscape company to install fake sod and poured concrete, right? Over part of my marshy shoreline, a wetland. I was furious. I tried every local authority, county, state, land board. No one wanted the fight. That area is murky jurisdictionally, they said. Meanwhile, the HOA started hosting lake events, jet skis, loud music, banners. One night, someone cut the wire on my dock lighting system. Then someone dumped chlorine into my creek. I lost half my fish. I installed cameras, posted signs, got a lawyer, but the damage was done. My sanctuary had become a war zone, so I stopped fighting them like a neighbor and started fighting them like a former federal agent. I knew I needed more than outrage. I needed strategy. So I pulled out the deed, the original conservation agreement, and every report I'd ever filed with the trust. I called in some old colleagues from my land management days, wildlife ecologists, wetland experts, even a federal land lawyer. First, we documented everything. GPS-tagged photos, environmental reports, and the chainsaw carnage. Then we quietly contacted the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Turns out, Crystal Cove had unknowingly crossed into federally protected wetland. The moment they sent contractors over my line, they broke half a dozen laws. The marsh alone, protected under the Clean Water Act. The hawks, covered by the Migratory Bird Treaty. And the trees, some were part of a reforestation carbon offset program run by the government. So I let the feds cook. Meanwhile, I played it cool, calm, almost too calm. I accepted one of their HOA notices with a smile and a signed receipt. Then I began preparing a little welcome back party. I rented a large sign, 8 feet wide. I planted it right where they cleared the trees. Federal land violation site. Under investigation. Right below it, in bold red letters, trespassing is a federal offense. The next day I saw them. A slow trickle of Crystal Cove residents standing at the edge of the lot, wide-eyed. Marlene, she tried calling a meeting. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Too late. Federal investigators had already started interviewing contractors. The landscapers flipped fast. Gave names, times, emails. I even heard one of them say, they told us it was HOA land. But the kicker? The HOA had used association funds to pay for the tree removal, which meant every homeowner in Crystal Cove had just unknowingly funded a felony. Their beautification project? Now officially an environmental crime scene. And the feds? Oh, they were just getting started. The subpoenas came on a Tuesday. Every board member of the Crystal Cove HOA received one. Marlene tried to act unfazed, even hosted an emergency meeting, until 2 black Suburbans pulled up during her live stream. Yep, she was mid-Zoom call when the feds arrived at her door. Poetic timing. They seized HOA records, laptops, contractor receipts, even drone footage the HOA had taken of my land weeks before the incident. It was clear this wasn't an accident. And the penalties? Oh, they were glorious. The HOA was fined $2.4 million in environmental, restoration, and legal fees. Crystal Cove was ordered to fund reforestation under federal supervision. Marlene, charged with conspiracy, trespassing, and destruction of federally protected habitat. She resigned in disgrace. But the most satisfying moment? Watching the same neighbors who once partied on my dock now stand in silence at a mandatory community service. Briefing, holding shovels, not cocktails. They were ordered to plant 1,001 native trees, one for everyone they destroyed. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, as they worked under the spring sun. And when Marlene passed by in court-mandated orange and asked me, bitterly, was it worth it? I just smiled. Every tree tells a story. You gave them a hell of a chapter. It took over a year to fully heal the land. But the forest is coming back. The marsh sings again. And the hawks? They returned. They built a new nest high in one of the remaining pines, just above the new conservation sign I posted. I walk the trails with my dog every morning now. Same boots, same coffee, but a new sense of peace. And no clipboard-wielding HOA invaders in sight. If this story taught me anything, it's this. You don't need to raise your voice to fight back. You just need to know the laws and stand your ground. People like Marlene thrive on assumed power. But when that illusion is stripped away, when the law comes knocking, their empire of intimidation crumbles. So if you're watching this and dealing with HOA hell, stay calm, document everything. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is letting justice do the heavy lifting. Comment below, what would you have done in my shoes? Or if you made it this far and believe in justice. Served, drop that phrase in the comments. And hey, hit that like button if you believe trees deserve better. Until next time, protect your peace and your property. Because some folks forget, the land remembers.